is Rock and Roll Grad School with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling. Wherever you go, whatever you do, they will be right here waiting for you.
Hello, kiddies. We're going to have a good time today. We are talking with David Libert, the author of a new book who had a just fascinating career in music.
Amazing career with some really incredible people from
And
Alice Cooper,
a
Parliament.
disparate group.
Yes.
So that will be fun. We didn't really talk about Scorpions. I know everyone right now is probably talking about the Taylor Hawkins tribute, and we should.
Yes, we should. And our wonderful friend Josh Fries.
Who seems like this might have been an audition for him to play for the Foo Fighters.
There's a lot of rumors of that, but who knows? He's played with some greats himself many times.
Did you notice his shorts, by the way?
I did, but I can't believe you didn't know which drumhead I was talking about.
I didn't see this. What drumhead were you talking about?
You didn't see Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, on the bass drum head. Yes, I did. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't distinguish which drum.
Thank you. Yes. Okay.
But he wasn't the only one who played on that kit. Like Travis played on it too, but he played on it a long time.
Yes. No, it was, I think, probably the best tribute concert I've seen ever. And I think just something about the emotion of it was so incredibly visceral that you could just feel throughout, and the love. And even afterwards, I saw somebody in some band that had opened for Foo Fighters in the past, and this guy was saying like they were supposed to go out with them again, and he canceled it because him and his wife were about to have a baby, and like called the band, was like, guys, I'm really sorry, I just don't want to be away from home. Months later, finds out that Dave and Taylor have gone and paid for everything on the registry and not told him. And just like they seemed like he was the nicest guy and just had a big heart and was open to everybody. And the fact that all the people there, and then even the people just sending videos, it was like, again, this wide array of people who were influenced by him.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you're like, you wish you could have seen that when he was still alive.
Right. Well, it was Chad Smith that was talking about Guitar Center.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go and just buy, and the guy Guitar Center is like, his credit card's been stolen. And they're like, no, he's just buying stuff for kids who need it when they're in there playing.
Which is
amazing.
Yeah. So very good, worth watching. Do you know if they're streaming the one in LA in a month?
I would imagine they're going to, and I would imagine at some point they'll weave them together where you can.
That would be
because the only thing that was hard, we watched, because I clicked the wrong button, we ended up watching like the hour version first, which was lovely, but way too short. You missed a lot of really good stuff. But then we watched the full version and just kind of buzzed through. And there's a lot of dead time for setup.
Yes.
Is the only thing that's kind of hard when you're not watching it live, that I wish they had some more of those like pieces of footage and more people kind of talking and things like that. But I think, eventually they'll have that, but it's still worth it because you can fast forward it.
What were the highlights that they focused on? I mean, I'm assuming a lot of the Foos stuff at the end.
So they did, Chrissy Hind and Paul McCartney.
Of course.
They did, obviously, the Hot for Teacher.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of the Foo stuff at the end. They did one of the Queen songs.
That was amazing.
But Rush wasn't in the hour-long one at all.
Okay, so my follow-up question was them Crooked Vultures in the hour, then that answers that question. If Rush didn't make it.
Right.
Because I was sitting there with the elder and we're watching it, and I'm like, no, that's John Paul Jones. And he was just like, how come no one's acknowledging that the guy from Led Zeppelin's on stage?
Well, Dave was like, oh my God, that guy's like totally missing the notes. And he goes, oh crap, that's John Paul Jones.
My favorite thing, I've introduced the elder to that record, and he's like, well, are they doing anything? I was like, no, they haven't, but Dave Grohl has said he's never telling anyone that the band's broken up because he wants to say, I'm in a band with John Paul Jones.
course, that's fair.
And it seems like Josh Homme has a similar mindset of like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to not be hanging out with this dude.
No, of course not. It's
So
amazing.
it was very nice, and it puts a very high bar for LA.
It does put a high bar for LA.
But I'm assuming the people they will get for LA. I mean, I saw Alanis is is going to do that, and they have a bunch of repeats as well.
They do.
But
A lot of but some other good ones are there too. Miley Cyrus is there. There's Pink.
yeah, oh, that's right. Yes, Doylestown Zone.
Yes. There's more ladies at the.
There is, and Justin Hawkins was.
I mean, I love him. I want to
The
be
kids
friends
were
with
like,
him.
"What? Does he always wear that?" I'm like, "Yep,
Have you introduced them to the darkness?
I have." They both really like Wednesday night.
That's fair.
Or
Wednesday.
no, I'm sorry.
night.
Is it Friday night? Friday night.
Is it?
Sunday.
I don't know. That
Monday
night. I
rowing,
know what
Tuesday
side you're on.
gymnastics, dancing on a Friday night. Friday night.
That
Okay.
Friday night. Yes.
Yeah, but they were just like, does he always wear that kind of one piece thing? And I was
There
like,
were a lot
then-
of onesies.
and then
like-
I said, well, Freddie Mercury wore one of those. No, he didn't. I'm like, oh my God. Please. That was his bread and butter. He wore that to
Yeah.
the store.
He did. He definitely did. Yeah, there was a lot of very tight one piece plunging. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And it felt very English too, the whole thing. I mean, having
for sure.
Supergrass.
Yes, and to have so much Supergrass because I love them and
I-
don't hear much of them of late.
And it seems too like that they paid a lot of attention to bands and artists he really liked
Yes,
and
that
made
was
sure they
very
were
clear.
well represented.
That was very clear that they were very conscientious to make this about like what he loved and who he was, as if it was like a show for him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know.
But if you didn't
really
get a
about
little
him.
emotional watching all of this, I mean, you
Well,
had
and the
to-
kids, like, oh my God, Mandy, she's the greatest person
Oh
ever.
my God. Yes.
Like, if you're not smiling and happy,
As she's
And
trying to
you
climb
see
up onto the
her,
drum riser.
she's
Yeah.
amazing. She was the best. And obviously his kid was awesome. And Dave's
Even Josh
brother.
Homme's kid too.
Yes. Like all the kids were.
Have you seen the
super
video?
group.
Have you seen the video? It's somebody shot it. It was while Violet Grohl was doing Valerie with Mark Ronson down at the end of the Rockway.
Mhm.
On the stage, on the like right hand side, Pat Smear was sitting there, I think with his kids. And Dave Grohl and his wife were there. And like one at a time, a couple of their other kids came down, sat, and they were just sitting there. Pat Smear's swinging his legs, just listening, just
That's
like,
awesome.
this is so nice. And like, again, it's sort of like the perfect tenor for what you would want a tribute to be to
Yes.
somebody. Like it's got its moments of heaviness and mourning, and then but there's a lot of celebration within that, and it just felt very, very nice. And
It was sweet.
yeah,
I'll be alone each and every night. While you're away, don't forget to write. Bye bye, so long, farewell.
it seemed like
Bye bye,
you,
so long.
I think inadvertently, kind of had a front row seat to all the changes and developments and growth of the music industry in the last half century. Did you feel that way at the time? Were you thinking this is going to make a great book one of these days?
Last thing on my mind, actually, I had no idea that I was going to end up writing a book.
What was the thing that finally made you go, you know what? Now's the time.
Actually, it was my girlfriend, who's been listening to all these stories forever, said, you really ought to write a book. And I said, do you really think this is a story worth telling? I mean, she said, absolutely. So that was the inspiration. And then as I got into it, I started to recount lots of different things. And yeah, this would be good for the book. So that's sort of the genesis of it all.
I love that you thought that people wouldn't be interested in this. Your stories are incredible. And I'm not just saying that because you've had such a front row seat to so many Detroit musicians, and I'm a Detroit girl, but they're just, that journey with you is so fun, and it's with so many iconic people that I would imagine everyone probably tries to corner you at any party to find out everything they can about you.
First of all, I don't go to a lot of parties these days.
Fair.
And I never, as I was living all of this, it never really occurred to me that, gee, this is something that, yes, other people seem interested in these kinds of things, but I never really thought that all of this would end up in a book. And also, you sort of have to think about, do I want to put this in the book? Am I throwing somebody under the bus? Is it? Are they going to get mad at me? So you have all of those considerations as well when you're writing a book like that. So some of the more sordid stuff didn't make the cut. So I didn't want it to be a sort of a salacious kind of tell-all type of book. I wanted it to be more about, just being there when some of these things actually happen. So yeah, it's a little bit of that. It's rock and roll, but of course, you can't get around that. But I didn't want that to be the purpose of the book.
You definitely walk the line to where those people who love the dirty tales of rock and roll will still enjoy it, but without going over the top. So you definitely walked that line very well.
Oh, good to hear.
And I've read them all, so I'm a good judge of character on that.
And a lot of your various endeavors seem to sort of just come very naturally one after the other. Was there any point along the way where you thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Because you're in the happenings, you have a hit single that you wrote.
Didn't write it.
Oh, you did not write See You in September?
No.
All right, well, you had a hit signal that you sang on, which is more than I can say for either one of us. And then you left to go join an agency as a booking agent, where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then you start booking acts and managing people. Like, what was the thing where you're like, this is where I'm headed? Did you know ever?
I think that when I left the happenings, I wanted to remain in the music business. And, for the last couple of years of being in the happenings, I was also the de facto manager.
Right.
And I felt, I liked it. I said, this is something that maybe I can continue to do down the road. I was pretty sure I couldn't be a happening forever, but I could manage other bands. But I think at that point, I decided, why don't I try to acquire as much experience and knowledge as I can, and I could use that as time goes by to help me with whatever it is I'm going to be pursuing in the music industry.
Well, I think that's something that's really interesting, as Luke sort of touched on in the book. I found it really profound that you always sort of seem to know, like, what, this time, people stay in dead-end jobs or jobs that aren't going to get them where they want to be for decades and never have the bravery to move on. And just knowing with the happening specifically, and then even further down the road with other artists, that, what, there's something else I need to do now. Is that something you just always had in you from even when you were a kid? Or is that something that you just acquired? Because especially in an industry like that, people are afraid. They think this is their one shot.
No, I don't think my shot was the happenings. After that, it was a job. It was work. It was, so if I'm going to do a job outside of being a performer, this seemed to be a good industry. And I felt I had a little bit of an advantage in most people because I wasn't starting from scratch. I had basically been the manager of the happenings. I was dealing with record companies and booking agencies and PR firms and that kind of thing. And so it became my, my education. I think that I said, I can do this. I didn't really have a fear because I didn't know how it was all going to fall into place. So I said, just, keep your nose to the grind, and we'll see what unfolds. And that was sort of my philosophy on how to move forward.
And when you get into the managing and the working on the tours, you said, I think you did one tour with Rare Earth and then right into the $1 Billion Babies Alice Cooper show.
I think it was the Killer tour that I joined.
Okay. And then you went into Billion. Because, I mean, those at that time, his show was a whole spectacle. I mean, $1 Billion Babies, isn't that the one with James Randi where they were beheading Alice every night?
Let's see. Killer tour, they hung him. James Randi, was the guillotine.
Right.
Gallows, guillotine. Electric chair was actually before my time.
Well,
so as a matter of fact, when I just got the job, Shep Gordon, Alice Cooper's manager, took me up to the Gillespie estate, which was this old rundown mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, where all the band was living, with their roadies and their girlfriends and their dogs and cats. And the Gillespie estate had this one huge ballroom, which they set up for rehearsals. And when I got there, I walked in and they had just gotten the guillotine, the gallows, and they were practicing hanging Alice on the gallows. They wanted to make sure they didn't kill him in the process.
Fair.
Wasn't his family there that night too? Wasn't that part of it? Because his parents and everybody were coming to that?
Yeah, when I got there, his parents were there.
Oh.
It was really, really bizarre because here they are watching their kid being hung over and over again.
No problem.
No, they look kind of horrified. I said, this is going to be a pretty cool gig.
That's amazing.
And the other thing that's interesting is the wide array of artists that you worked with. I mean, starting with the Happenings, but then you go to Alice Cooper, the Runaways, Parliament. I mean, bands, Living Colour, Vanilla Fudge, that might not ever share a bill together.
No.
Did you, I mean, do you have to love the music to be able to go all of these different ways? Do you love these bands that you worked with? Or is that incidental?
And more than that, you have to believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to believe that they're going to make it, or in some cases they had already made it. And, whether it's heavy metal or rock or R&B or funk, they all share the same, it's the same record companies, it's the same booking agencies, it's more or less the same promoters, the same venues. So there is a common thread through all of it, even though the music is different. So from my perspective as a manager, as a booking agent, I didn't really need to undergo a metamorphosis in order to deal with a different genre of music. It was all kind of the same. You just had to love it and you had to believe in it.
And, two of the groups I mentioned, Alice Cooper, who I guess was solo at that point, and George Clinton, I think they're two people who probably themselves would admit they walked the line, a very, very thin line for a lot of the 70s before they kind of turned their life around and cleaned up and changed the way they were behaving. I mean, of two tours to be in the midst of and to see, those folks seem like this is the ultimate, the Stones in 72, that's nothing to these guys and what they were doing. I mean, Parliament had a UFO, didn't they? That they were landing on stage?
They had a big spaceship that landed on stage.
That's just crazy. I mean, again, it seems like if you could handle those folks, you could handle anybody.
Well, it's probably why I don't have any hair on my
head.
it's, I think one of the, you talk about connections, Alice Cooper in Parliament, having been involved with all of the stage props and the production of an Alice Cooper tour, which at the time was probably the most complex, complicated tours of the time.
Sure.
When I became involved with Parliament Funkadelic, it gave them the ability to have someone like me in their corner to help them put their production together. So in that respect, there was that connection. I knew exactly what to do with what George wanted on the stage.
Did it ever get too weird for you? Where you're just like, guys, we cannot do this.
As far as production goes?
Yeah.
Or anything.
No.
Or anything, yeah.
No. Well, production-wise, I suppose it was my job to be able to bring their imagination of what they wanted to be to fruition, to make it happen. So as far as production goes, no. As far as dealing with personalities, that's a whole other thing, of course. And whatever, Parliament Funkadelic was somewhat difficult to deal with. There were so many of them.
That's a lot of people.
A lot of drugs involved.
Yeah.
It did get pretty crazy. I mean, I did get some education about that kind of thing dealing with Alice Cooper, because of course, not so much Alice, but the rest of them and the roadies, they certainly did their share of drugs and craziness and all of that. So by the time I got around to Parliament Funkadelic and George Clinton, even though it was craziness on steroids, at least I did have some crazy experience to fall back on.
Not to mention you're taking one for the team for the happenings.
I think you're referring to the marijuana bus.
Yeah.
In what was it, North Carolina, in Raleigh. We had when we were in El Paso, for some reason or other, even though we weren't going through customs or immigration, they inspected all our bags at the airport in El Paso and found a couple of pot pipes in Bobby Miranda and Tommy Giuliano's luggage. And these pipes had like a trace of marijuana in the pipes, but they got arrested. I didn't. I was able to get the charges dismissed. I found a good lawyer. He got it dismissed on the grounds of illegal search and seizure. So when several months later, I'm not sure of the timeline, we were all in California and we decided to buy some, like a pound of weed there, because the weed in California was a lot better than it was in New York. So we took that pound to Raleigh, North Carolina with us on our way back home to New York, got caught, and the cop, but it was in the possession of the roadies, not any members of the happenings. So the cop says, here's the deal, the lead officer in the case. If one of you musicians, one of you happenings don't cop to it, I'm going to arrest all of you and you can all deal with that way. But if one of you will admit that it's your stuff, I'll let the other happenings go. And I'll just arrest that happening plus the two roadies, in which we found who were in possession of the contraband. So I just reasoned that I wasn't busted in El Paso. In El Paso, I had a perfectly clean record. I could probably survive the consequences, whereas maybe Bobby and Tommy couldn't because this was their second shot. Right. So I took the rap. Yeah, took one for the team. So
yes.
to speak.
Are you still in touch with any of them? I know I think Bobby's still touring with other members of the Happenings. You guys keep in touch at all?
Yeah, Luke, as a matter of fact, yeah, Bobby is the last remaining Happening. It still tours as the Happening. And after I had left the Happenings, none of us really spoke till about maybe 10, 12 years ago. I connected with Bobby and we did some things together. I got him some licensing deals for some recordings that he did. So we sort of, but it wasn't until just very recently that I got back into contact with Tommy Giuliano, because when I got involved in the Flo and Eddie lawsuit, which was a lawsuit brought on by Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, the two ex-Turtles that call themselves Flo and Eddie. They sued SiriusXM and Pandora for not being paid artist royalties, because Pandora and SiriusXM interpreted law that anything recorded prior to 1972, they were not required to pay artist royalties. So they sued, and in the process, and won. We all got a nice windfall out of it. I became sort of rekindled my friendship with Tommy Giuliano, which was a nice thing. I mean, you know, Bobby and Tommy played such an important role in my life way back then. You know, when we were all in the Happenings, it was nice to be able to be friends with them once again.
And then one of the other names that popped up a bunch in your book, and I feel like throughout music history, is Shep Gordon. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with him and what that was like? It seems like he was a bit of a mentor guide to you, or am I?
Absolutely, he was he was my mentor. Whatever I knew about the music business prior to my hooking up with Alice Cooper and Shep Gordon, 99% of what I eventually learned about it really came from being associated with Alice and Shep Gordon. I mean, I learned so much about him. I learned about tact, strategy, patience, when to get mad. Everything he did was very calculated, and we were also very good friends. You know, we did a lot of hanging out together. You know, back in New York, I even conned him into going out to Fire Island, which was my summer retreat, which he wasn't too happy about. But once he got out there, you know, he was happy. We had a great time together. And, of course, I ended up having a falling out with Shep because being Alice Cooper's tour manager was a grueling undertaking. I mean, it just so at the end of every tour, I would quit, and he would bribe me back with bigger salaries and bonuses, and till finally, after a few tours, there wasn't enough money that he could bribe me back with, and that's when I left. And he wasn't happy about it, but somehow or other, it took a long time, but we resolved our differences, and he's been very supportive of the book, and wrote a very nice quote for the back cover. And my other great influence was Johnny Podell, who was Alice Cooper's agent and was also the agent for Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, George Harrison, the Allman Brothers, probably the greatest agent that ever lived. And he's also very supportive. Of course, I wrote such wonderful things about him in my book.
Yes.
He thinks it's a great book.
Of course.
So, between Shep Gordon and Johnny Podell, Heidi, I learned pretty much everything I know about the music business.
That's awesome. Well, and speaking of quotes for the book, I have never, in all of my years of reading books about the music industry, seen such an outpouring of quotes from legends that were so just complimentary, so much love for you. You are clearly one of the most beloved humans to have come through this crazy business. Or you bribed them really well. I don't know. But I'm thinking the former, not the latter.
I threatened them.
No, dug out Alice's old guillotine.
I think part of the trick in either being a tour manager or a manager or booking is to develop a genuine friendship with these people. And so we shared a lot of things together. You know, people like George Clinton, Alice Cooper, stars of that caliber don't have any real friends. They have people they hang out with, they have handlers, sure. They're friendly with other artists, but they don't have any normal friends. That's the truth.
Yeah.
I became, I suppose, the closest thing to it in my relationship with these people. And I guess that held over, that friendship and respect that we had for each other and knowing each other's secrets, all that kind of stuff. I guess it resonated, deep inside them. So when they were asked to write something, they were happy to do it. And I was really honored to have them do it as well.
Well, what do you think you did that created that relationship on your end? Like you said, oh, these people don't have real friends. What did you do that was different?
Well, you got to remember, I was an employee, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I made it fun for them. We hung out together. We, we had a good time together. We confided in one another. Talked about things that we probably couldn't talk about with anybody else. So as much as they influenced my life, I suppose I influenced their lives as well. I think Alice Cooper's a perfect example. I was in a position to hire a few of my friends that weren't in the music business because they were sort of blue collar guys. They were either electricians or contractors, perfect for being part of a production crew on tour. And I think their whole, that all had a tremendous influence on the environment of the tour. And, after a while, people on the tour, including Alice and Shep, I guess for that matter, started to emulate these people in the way they looked at life. Mm-hmm. Their penchant for busting chops. But they were hardworking guys, so they were respected. And I guess, when you put all that together, working hard, making the artist feel that what you're doing for them is important to you, not just important to them, and genuinely feel that way, and having fun with them, I think that kind of thing remains with them, even decades after you leave their employ.
Well, I think you obviously built up that trust so much because I think they have to feel like everyone's in it for something, or and bringing your friends along and all of that, and everyone being so down to earth. And I love what you said about Alice's tour, how it was very much everyone stayed at the same hotels. There were the only reserved seats were for the poker game and those kinds of things, and everyone was just sort of, and I love that because I've always loved Alice and just made me love him more. So
well, Heidi, he was the kind of rock star, and I think I mentioned this in my book. He didn't need a lot of maintenance. He didn't need a lot of fawning over. He just really wanted to be one of the guys, especially when he became friends with my Fire Island friends back home. It was all really just one big family, which is a little bit unusual with rock and roll entourages because they usually are separate. The band doesn't stay at the same hotel as the crew, and there was none of that on an Alice Cooper tour. We were all in it together, and I think I mentioned, Alice really didn't have any airs about him. He never really took himself all that seriously. He took what he did seriously, but he wasn't full of himself. So he could hang out with one of the guys in the crew and be just as comfortable with them as he would be with hanging out with Mick Jagger. It was all the same to him, as far as hanging out. He was a good guy.
As we kind of wrap up, Heidi mentioned that the praise for the book has been effusive. What do you think of it? When you look at it and see the cover and see your name on it, what's your reaction?
I guess I wonder where all that hair went.
Rock and Roll Warrior by David Libert is available September 23rd wherever you get your books. For more information, you can follow him on Twitter, where he is @DLibert.
You can check us out on all the various socials. Be sure to visit our website at rockandrollgradschool.com, and don't forget to leave us a review.
Today's show is produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our intern is Zach Jackson. This one's for Philippe. Thank you, good night, and may all your favorite bands stay together.